I think I'm a good listener because I can pick up on small details.
I'm not a good listener. Like whatever you're just saying right now, it's just going out in the ear and out the other.
I try and listen actively, like out for the best interest of my friends, but I could be better. And that sometimes I rush and like give input and, I should let people finish more, but I really, really try.
Girls tell me I listen to them well.
I care about what people have to say and like to give them my input.
I listen fully as opposed to just thinking about what my next answer is going to be and missing out on the question.
I listen fully because I would like to know what he or she is talking about so I could understand better. Then I will have my turn to say something.
Explain why it is so hard for us to pay attention to someone as they speak.
I don't know. I'm thinking of the next question, what you're going to say and how I'm going to answer it.
I mean, if you're talking a lot, it's definitely hard to keep your attention focused on one thing. I can't really pay attention to you because I just want to play these games.
We're constantly thinking about what we want to say next, so our mind is racing, so we lose track of what the actual person is trying to say.
Human instinct is kind of, I want to jump in, I know the answer, but I kind of learned in college, like active listening in my psychology class. They're saying it's such a skill because you have to let the people speak, let them finish, like nod and say like what they're thinking is valid. And it's really hard to do that in practice, but I'm trying.
Our world is full of constant distractions.
From the moment we enter high school, many of us find that we're busy running from activity to activity.
Trying to focus on school, sports, clubs, friends, family, and whatever else comes up.
And then we have our phones and iDevices where we are bombarded with instant info, constant contact by text, Facebook, and instant messaging.
It's hard to focus on the people and things right in front of us with a million other things trying to grab our attention all at once.
Listening and really paying attention to what others are saying to you can be a difficult challenge in today's world.
What does it really mean to listen? That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Maddie.
And I'm Nick.
And this is Realfaith TV. Some of the teens on the street felt that they were good listeners,
while others recognized that their listening skills needed some work.
We'll hear from them more in a little while, as well as meet our studio guests.
But first, let's meet our spotlight guest, Nicole, who will explain to us if there's a difference between listening and hearing,
as well as share with us some of the qualities of a good listener.
I do believe that listening and hearing are different. I think hearing is just reception of sound. That's it. You can hear an alarm go off or a dog bark or a sneeze or your stomach grumble, but it may not be any sort of two-way street. Listening definitely requires reception and response. It requires a sort of analysis, really taking in what the person is saying, having that understanding, that empathy, that willingness to take whatever you're hearing and take it further. My favorite type of listener is the one that asks questions at the appropriate time. Someone who's listening to you and you're telling a story and they're nodding and that's great. And then after you finish saying what you have to say, asks another question that leads you further into conversations. Makes you feel like they really appreciate what you're saying. They're interested in hearing more about you. That's such a nice kind of listener. My least favorite kind of listener is the kind who just nods along, yeah, definitely, because it makes me feel like I'm talking to a bobblehead. Yeah, and it's just uncomfortable. I think some qualities of a good listener are patience. You have to have patience for someone getting their story out, whatever they're trying to say. You want to be focused on what they're saying, not doing something else with your hands or putting your attention somewhere else. You also want to not be planning a response in advance as the person's talking, thinking, oh, that would be a great response. Oh, I know what I'm going to say. Oh, she said this. I have a good story. You want to really give all of your attention and your energy to what the speaker is saying so that you can absorb it, respond if appropriate, and just be patient, let their whole story get out before you say or do anything. When somebody comes to you and you're going to sit in a listening role for them, there is that sense of trust. It may not be, I'm going to trust you with my life, these big dark secrets, but it's the sense that I'm trusting you with how I'm feeling right now. I'm trusting you with what's in my heart and in my life, and I'm going to share it with you. And that trust is something that should be respected. And even if it's just sharing what happened at school that day or work or their frustration with their best friend or their girlfriend or whatever, you should respect that trust. There's a sense of sacredness there, that you're being invited into their lives, into their world, even just for that moment. And that also means that whatever you absorb in that listening situation may not always be welcome to be shared, even if it's something trivial. because you're being welcomed into that situation, it's not yours to share. It's not your story. There should be that sense of reverence for that information, and it should be kept with you. Even if it's just something small, it's the right thing to do out of respect for that person.
I like how Nicole said that there's a difference between hearing and listening, because I feel that I find myself hearing but not actually listening. And like she had said, that listening is not just a quality of hearing what that person has to say, but putting input into the conversation and making sure you're not thinking of the next thing to tell them.
Right, I liked how she said that too. Well, let's see what our studio guests have to say about listening.
They are
Desiree,
Christian,
Will,
Gabby,
Kelly.
and Colin.
So why is it important to listen carefully?
And what are some qualities of a good listener?
I think it's important to listen carefully because you're their friend usually when you listen to someone, and like it's not only just to like have a good conversation or have a fun conversation, it's because they're either looking to vent to you or to like ask you for advice. So I think you need to be there for them. And good qualities are, I think, eye contact, because I think that eye contact really shows that you're paying attention.
I think knowing when to like give input, like whether it's like advice or venting, like knowing when it's advice and knowing when it's venting and when to give them, when to talk to them.
Sometimes just sitting there and listening to what they have to say, because that can mean a lot to them if they need to vent to you. So it's not necessarily talking.
Or like nodding your head, like you could just be sitting there when somebody's talking to you and.
Right, I nod my head all the time, and Nicole said she doesn't like that, but I think it's like encouraging, like the people are listening to you.
Yeah, but it's like what the person said about being a bobblehead. It doesn't actually look like you're paying attention. It just looks like you're showing them, like, yeah, I'm not actually listening to you, but yeah, sure, whatever.
Sometimes it can be distracting.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends if it's like meant or not. Like if you don't mean it and you're just kind of like the whole time, but if they say something and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good point.
How we listen and how we respond speaks volumes to the other person about what they mean to us.
How important we think they are, and what the nature of our actual relationship is.
When we fail to listen to others or respond in a way that lacks real thought or empathy,
we come across as indifferent to their situation, and it shows a level of disrespect for them as people.
Next, we ask the teens on the street if they or someone they know has trouble listening to others.
Let's hear what they had to say.
My friend that's actually on the boardwalk with me right now is a terrible listener, terrible with directions and everything. So when I'm in the car trying to tell him what's going on, like make a left here, he'll just, he doesn't really pay attention. So things like that that will bother me.
My mom wants me to meet me at some place, and I'm not really listening to her. I'm concentrated on a question that I'm gonna ask her later about hanging out with a friend, and I'm not there, then she yells at me, and that's my fault because I'm thinking of something else.
My friends, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes we don't understand each other and we end up fighting. So it's like over simple things, and it's like, oh, really, that's what you said? Like it's so simple sometimes, and that actually happens a lot.
It does happen all the time. You can say you're going somewhere or you're going to meet someone somewhere, and there's always miscommunication. People end up in different spots, different places.
How can we work on this skill to get better at it?
You just gotta listen, pay attention.
Listen to what they have to say. I mean, it can be hard sometimes, like attention-wise, but everyone has a point, and you can't judge them. Everyone has something to say.
Listen more and like follow directions and get focused more when someone's talking to you.
I think we just all need to take a second to stop and look at the world around us and actually care about what each other's saying and what we have to think about. And if we explain ourselves better, then there won't be any miscommunication.
How hard is it for you guys to listen to others?
I guess it's kind of hard for me to listen to others because I have so many problems in my life that I want to focus on, and I don't want to listen to everybody else's problems because I want to tell them about my problems.
I think sometimes when you're listening to them, you kind of have an idea that you want to add to the conversation, but they just keep going, and so you kind of just stop listening. So you kind of just say what you want to in the middle of the conversation and cut them off.
It's really hard for me to listen to others because I have really bad ADD, as you guys know, and sometimes my mind just wanders off in a total different direction. So what we were saying before, sometimes I just smile and nod because I have no idea what's going on. So.
Let's face it, the act of being present almost requires someone taking a number or setting up an appointment with you.
Especially when we feel pressured to respond to the flutter of activity occurring on our phone or device.
Sometimes in the moments where real bridge building takes place through conversation,
we find we are preoccupied with a half dozen text messages or the latest social media trend.
By breaking out of your me-centric world, turning off the phone, the video games, the TV.
We allow ourselves to open up to others and communicate in the way God intended.
Let's go back to our spotlight guest, Nicole, where she'll share some of her pet peeves of people not listening to her.
And how her experience in service has helped her develop her listening skills in a new and important way.
One of my biggest pet peeves is when people are listening to me, but they're doing something else. Mom, I'm looking at you. My mother does this all the time. I love her to death, but she's always, writing a check or cleaning up after the dog or doing something, and she's not listening. She's just nodding along. And that's something that frustrates me. I think a lot of people are guilty of that. I know I am too. Whenever I'm really busy doing something, my friends will be talking to me and I'm like, yeah. And they'll say something totally random just to see if I'm paying attention. And usually I'm not. If someone's not giving you that attention, it gives this air of disrespect, even though they don't mean it that way. And we're all guilty of it, but that's why it helps to practice being a good listener, because then you give this attitude of what you have to say is important to me, I'm listening to you, and I respect what you have to say. As I've gotten older and I've done more service and been exposed to people who need to have the opportunity to tell their story and be listened to, I've come to like listening more. If you're doing service and you're with a population that struggles, that experiences homelessness, that's marginalized, they don't get the opportunity to tell their story. They're kind of lost in the shuffle. And some of the most meaningful experiences I've had in service have come from listening to these people tell their stories and really listening, not just hearing a story, oh, and that's nice, and oh, I'm so sorry for you, but listening, understanding, giving them the dignity that they might be missing out on. To have that empathy and understanding really takes your listening to a whole nother level. It helps you to focus on what they're feeling, what they're going through, even if it's just a story from their day at work, and take it a little further in being in relationship with them. I do think it's easier to listen when you can relate to what's being said, simply because you have that personal connection, Oh, me too. You can kind of spin it a little bit back about me, and now it's a dialogue. When you're listening to someone or you're hearing someone say something that you have no personal connection to, you can't interject at all, it's harder because you're thinking to yourself, oh gosh, I can't relate. I don't know what he's talking about. This is, oh my gosh, I've never been in this situation before. And you automatically sort of shut down. So if you're in that situation, you really have to work hard to engage in what the person's saying, and you don't have to completely understand it, but you have to take the opportunity to appreciate what they're saying and give them the respect that their story or whatever they're saying, what they're feeling, has value.
When have you really listened to someone, and did that change your relationship with that person?
Well, with my parents and I, most of the time we're listening to music or we're really busy, and we don't have time to sit and just enjoy each other's company. But one day I suggested, why don't we get out the old record player and we could put records on there, we can listen to that instead of just all running around and doing our own little thing. And it was funny because we all comment on the music or whatever, and it brought up a sense of community, or we were a lot closer that day after that.
I have a similar experience with my mom. She worked 78 hours last week, and I only saw her as I was leaving for work and she was coming home, or vice versa. So we had 30 minutes together, and I was like, so what'd you do today? How was your day? And I just listened. I've had a relationship with my mom for 17 years, but it was nice just to sit for 30 minutes and talk to her, and it helped our relationship grow in just that 30-minute span.
Well, yeah, parents, I know my parents always say, oh, we're just an ATM for you now. And it's nice to just sit there and just talk to them.
A lot of my friends come to me for advice and stuff, and just to talk, and that's really helped my relationship with them. My one friend comes to me with things she would never tell anybody else, things that are going on in her house, in her life, and it really the personal things that she's told me has helped our relationship grow stronger.
Yeah, I know for me, my friend, he's his dad's in the military, so he travels around a lot, and his stop is in New Jersey now, and he texts me a lot about his girl problems or whatever, and I help him and I give him advice a lot, and he always says thank you, and I feel I've gotten closer with him just as he's gotten closer with me.
I feel when people when you listen to people, they would they know that you care about them more, and then they'll talk more and tell more about themselves.
Yeah, I like where she was going with that. I feel like if a person listens to them, you can really open up to them and you can trust them with everything if they just listen to you. Because if you're like trying to open up to a person and they don't really listen to you, you're like, then I'm not going to talk to you.
Yeah, like
you're not worth my time.
Sorry, one thing I found, like even with the teen on the streets, like interviewing them, like if I like look engaged in the conversation, like and I nod and I like even make a yeah comment, like they'll tell you more, like they'll be like they feel more comfortable with you. They'll like give you more information about like the question. So
I also kind of saw that. Yeah. Like it just kind of said yeah afterwards, like it's a good idea, and then they just like shared more.
You get what you put into it almost.
Yeah. While refining our listening skills may take some effort and practice, it's always ideal to look to the good listeners in our life as leaders.
Perhaps these people are parents, guidance counselors, teachers, even our best friends.
We can even look to Jesus' example of humility and love when he listened intently to the many who encountered him during his time on earth.
Jesus' example shows us that personal relationships and the way we care for others is the most important way that we can love God.
Caring and loving means listening to the thoughts, needs, and concerns of people in our lives.
It is through careful listening that we discover how we can best serve others and how we can get to know one another authentically.
And we can even know God more authentically if we just take some time to listen to what he is telling us.
Let's go back to Nicole, where she'll discuss an experience on a retreat where she allowed herself to fully listen to what God was saying to her.
And how we can look at examples in the Bible where listening to God's will changed the course of human history.
I went on a retreat. It was my first experience with the Jesuit priests and the Ignatian style of spirituality, and I loved it. But a priest, gave us a whole session on the retreat about silence and listening and taking the opportunity to listen in prayer and things like that. And I was struggling with that at the time because my prayer life, which it still kind of is, involves a lot of talking at God, and pray, all right, God, here's the things I need to pray for, here's the things that are bothering me, boom, 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 kind of a laundry list. And when I was on that retreat, I really took the time to just sit and say, all right, whatever God needs to say, it's going to be said whether I like it or not. I have no control. God speaks when we pause long enough to listen. Let your mind relax and let God have the opportunity to speak, whether it's in church, a place that you like to pray, a place in your house. Just being silent and letting whatever God needs to say be said is really, I think, the best way to listen to God. I think Jesus' life is full of opportunities for us to learn how to listen from his experience. I mean, even before Jesus was born, he was the product of listening. When the angel Gabriel came to Mary, and she was a young girl, she was 13, 14 years old, to announce that she would have the opportunity to be the Theotokos, the God-bearer, Mary didn't just blindly take what was being said and roll with it. She really listened to what Gabriel was saying and really considered the implications of what would come and made a full decision based on the act of listening to God, listening to what was in her heart, and listening to Gabriel. So he's the product of that. And then in Jesus' life, I think one of the best examples of listening is in the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus is praying to God, and he's praying that he does not want the crucifixion to happen. He's not interested in dying and having this painful, horrible death at the hands of the Romans. No one wants that. But in his prayer, he asks God, your will be done, and gives God the opportunity to speak to him in prayer. And we don't know exactly what happened in that prayer. No one wrote down exactly what God said to Jesus. We'll never know. But there was that moment of listening, and that gave Jesus the strength to continue and to accept his cross, and which led to the resurrection, all sorts of wonderful things.
Do you think God listens to you, and do you always listen to him?
Yeah, I think we don't always listen to God, but he is always listening to us. But if we ask him something, then he'll answer our prayers, but not in the way that we think he'll answer our prayers. And I think that that's really important for us to understand, because we can't just ask for anything in the world and expect it on a silver platter. So
it is hard to listen to God. Personally, on mine, it is really hard. Sometimes we want to listen to God, but we're scared of what he's going to say to us, so we don't want to listen to God, because we each have what we want to be when we grow up, and how our plans would do, and we don't really see if God plan works into our plan. But sometimes you just gotta let it go, because God only wants us to be happy.
Next, we asked the teens on the street, what are some ways you listen to God?
Let's hear what they had to say.
The way to listen to God, I think, first and foremost, is through the Bible. It's been there for so long, and it's for you to understand. It hits on different topics, so many different topics.
He can communicate through almost everybody.
Through prayer, a lot. I pray every day and before every meal.
I try and put aside just quiet time to be with God, or I go on mission trips, or I go into nature because like it's really easy to find God on like a nice long run. But it's hard because sometimes I'm just like, I want to answer. You know, I have to sit and be more patient.
Are there any scriptures or prayers that can help you to get yourself in a listening mode to help you hear what God is trying to communicate to you?
I feel definitely it's be still and know that I am God. That's one of the best verses because sometimes you need to stop in your place and listen and hear God's voice in like this crazy world.
I don't really know many prayers or read many scriptures, but I just know God is there when I need to talk to someone.
I'd have to go with the main two, Our Father and Hail Mary.
The other day, I was like, oh, I need a certain message. I opened my devotion book in Matthew, and it kind of just answered exactly what I needed. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think the answer always comes to you if you're patient. I've always found that God does speak to you if you let Him, if you open yourself and listen.
The virtue of patience is key to a substantial and meaningful relationship, both with God and with our fellow neighbors.
And real listening takes time, too, so we need to be willing to be generous with our time.
Finally, our spotlight guest, Nicole, shares how it's not always easy to devote time to listening to others.
And how being a good listener can help us to be better Christians.
I think it's difficult to pay attention to someone when they speak because we do just live in a world of chaos, the world we live in, and our own personal world. You know, you're talking to someone maybe on the phone or in person at your house, and the phone's ringing, the wash is done, the dog needs to go outside, someone texted you, you're trying to Instagram a picture, there's just a lot going on, and it's hard to just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to dedicate the next couple minutes of my time to solely listening to you and what you have to say. And I think that's a challenge, just in the chaos we have in our worlds, in our hearts, in our souls. It's just, there's a lot going on. It's something that needs to be practiced, something that needs to be worked on, but people can get there. Being a good listener does provide the foundation for being a good Christian. It gives you the opportunity to listen to God and what God is saying in your life and in your prayer. It gives you the opportunity to build meaningful relationships, to help you interact well with people, and the chance for those people to be Christ in your life. Listening also provides a chance for you to find out what's happening in your heart, where you might be called to as a vocation or a service opportunity or a school or any major decision you're making in your life. Listening is the foundation of discernment. Whenever I'm getting ready to pray, to focus, to meditate, whatever it is that I'm going to do, I like to say the prayer of St. Francis. It's one that my dad and I really love and has just been very instrumental for me. And as I pray, I breathe in and out. And so I focus my mind on something repetitive for me, and it keeps my mind from wandering on to what homework I have to do, what errands I have to do, did I lock the door behind me, and just helps me focus my mind. I also really like my campus minister in high school had a prayer on his wall, a sort of prayer, and said, "Be still and know that I am God," and it filtered out each word until it just got down to be. And I like to reflect on that because it really helps me to remember that God's in control. All I need to do is just sit here, and good things will come of it. And so that's another one I like to use.
I really liked what she said about listening is the foundation of so many things. It's the foundation of being a good Christian or Catholic. It's a foundation for like discerning, like making a decision. And I just really like how like simply just listening and being silent and like actually listening can help you with so many things. It's so amazing.
Right, and like in order to listen, I think, you know how people always say, like if you're working, don't just stand there and do something. Well, no, don't just do something, just stand there and listen and just take some time not only to listen to other people, but to listen to God as well.
Yeah, and I like the point how she said that there's a lot of distractions in our modern life, and like we need to put those distractions away sometimes and just take a moment, listen to God, listen to the people you love, your family, your friends, and just because those times of listening are really important in becoming stronger in the relationships that you have with those people.
Well, it's like the story of Mary and her sister. When they were one was listening to Jesus while the other one was busy making the lunch or making the dinner, or preparing for the guests, which was Jesus. And Mary was sitting there listening to Jesus and content, and her sister got upset at her. And it just shows that, we need to sit there, we need to listen.
Because effective communication and listening is so important to knowing and being known,
and those things are so important to our human relationships,
the Holy Spirit gives us 3 gifts to assist us in this: wisdom, understanding, and counsel.
These gifts are handy in a lot of situations, but especially in listening.
Part of our baptismal call is to be prophet.
We are prophetic when we speak to people with truth and love.
We can speak most lovingly and truthfully when we understand clearly what others are saying.
Good listening is important in all areas of our lives: school, relationships, jobs, teams, and yet, so many people haven't been taught how to properly listen.
The best leaders are good listeners, as are our best friends.
So how are you becoming a better listener to those around you?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us at realfaithtv.com.
Or send us a tweet.
And we'll leave you today with this quote from the 1st century Greek philosopher Epictetus.
We have 2 ears and 1 mouth,
so that we can listen twice as much as we speak.
So practice opening your ears
and closing your mouth.
Just zip it up. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Realfaith TV. God bless.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money.